now. Let's start with South Africa. Still inflation reporting season, and inflation ticked up in January, marking the first uptick since the consumer price basket was revamped, just like Nigeria. However, the headline rate still sits comfortably at the lower end of the central bank's target range. Inflation climbed to 3.2% year-on-year, up from 3.0% in December, coming in below the 3.3% forecast and well within the South African Reserve Bank's 3 to 6% target range. South Africa's central bank has cut interest rates, it's, I think, like 3 monetary policy meetings now, but its last move in January followed a split decision as it stressed the uncertain global backdrop there, just like other central bankers. And to the car industry now, we see Toyota Motor Corp. They saw a 6% boost in their global production for January, marking its first year-on-year increase in 12 months. The automaker produced about 700,000 vehicles last month, fueled by a strong recovery in domestic manufacturing. Production in Japan, that jumped 22%, while North America also saw gains, particularly in Mexico, where output more than tripled thanks to operational adjustments. Following the news, Toyota's Tokyo-listed shares, that rose by 1.7% to 2,771 yen. And we see China is set to inject fresh capital into its 3 largest banks as part of a bold move to support its flagging economy. Sources say at least 400 billion yuan, about $55 billion, will be pumped into Agricultural Bank of China, Bank of Communications, and Postal Savings Bank of China, and that's in coming months. This move follows through on last year's broad stimulus package aimed at boosting economic recovery. And that's according to reports from Bloomberg. And to the social media space now, Meta, they issued an apology today explaining that they had corrected an error that caused some Instagram users to see a surge of violent and graphic content on their personal Reels page. The apology follows complaints from most of these users across social media who voiced concerns about an influx of disturbing and not safe for work material that was in their feeds. And to Nvidia now, they delivered another blockbuster performance in the fourth quarter with revenue soaring to $39.3 billion, beating expectations of $38 billion and marking a 45% jump from last year's $22 billion. Profits also surged, reaching $22.09 billion, up from $19.36 billion in the third quarter, while gross profit margins held steady at 73%. Looking ahead, Nvidia's forecast for Q1 revenue is equally impressive, with an expected $43 billion, keeping investors excited on what's to come for Nvidia. All right, this time we're seeing a trend where governments are cutting spending on aid and increasing spending on defense. Recently, Sir Keir Starmer set out plans to increase defense spending to 2.5% of national income by 2027. Let's bring in Juliana now, our London correspondent. Good morning, Juliana. Great to have you.
Good morning, Laddie.
So we're seeing UK Starmer there. He's to meet President Trump, and he seems to be arming the UK with a boost on defense. What are you hearing about this?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I don't think anybody was surprised following Tuesday's announcement by the Prime Minister that defence spending would increase to 2.5% of GDP by 2027. He actually has hopes of extending that to 3% within the next Parliament. And why is nobody surprised? It's because, of course, the Europeans consider that they are at a really pivotal time in history. I know that a lot of US President Donald Trump's remarks on social media, True Social, and at those press briefings can seem quite comical, but I think European leaders were very alarmed at about the US calling and describing Volodymyr Zelensky as a dictator. That was a huge kick to the teeth and the stomach, but also a realization that they can no longer, the Europeans, rely on the US for security. So, of course, after the onslaught of the full-scale invasion of Russia, Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, had spoke about this, because I think a lot of the British Army's equipment was considered dilapidated. But now, of course, they consider the threat more significant, which is why he's done this. But separately, as you quite rightly mentioned, Sir Keir Starmer is in Washington already. He arrived very late last night. It is going to be blockbuster stuff when he does that joint press conference with Donald Trump. And, he was pretty honest with British reporters when asked if Trump's recent remarks had persuaded him to kind of speed up this push of defense spending. And he said yes. So he's hoping to take that to the table today to try and convince Trump to provide some sort of security for Europe if there is this immediate ceasefire and European troops and British troops have to be on the ground. They want some sort of cover. But yes, it widely welcomed by all parties across the House. But of course, that reference you made to the cut in aid is very alarming, of course, because it coincides with the cut of US aid, and that is going to impact a lot of charities around the world.
Right. I guess, charities around the world have a tough 2025 coming with the big boys, looking to cut aid, to the rest of the world now. But let's look at the oil industry. We're seeing oil giant BP. They've announced they will cut its renewable energy investments and instead focus on increasing oil and gas production. I guess it's on the back of Trump's drill, baby, drill.
Yeah, that's right. I'm happy you said that, not me. Yes. No, you're absolutely right. It's quite interesting, isn't it? So much is happening, and Trump has only been in power since the 20th of January, barely a month, and everybody, including big businesses, are changing their stance. And for years, the only conversation within the oil sector, particularly in the global north anyway, was about renewables, was about cleaning up the dirty mess that had been made for decades. And we had UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres wagging his finger at them. But now, the conversation has shifted. I think, BP hasn't fared well amongst its competitors who don't seem to be losing confidence in shareholders. BP certainly has. And the CEO has decided that, look, yes, drill, baby, drill works well for them. They are going to be investing more in oil. So yesterday they announced that over the next couple of years, they're going to be increasing investments in oil and gas drilling, I think, by $10 billion. And within that same period, they're going to be reducing the investments in renewable energy by $5 billion. And I think immediately their shares went up. They've since dipped. But it does appear as if, the conversation is shifting away from the kind of heightened urgency we had from all of the COPs to now a little bit more of a realist, pragmatist, capitalist approach.
Yeah, they're definitely quite interesting with all the pledges, we've had from most of the COPs we've had so far. But, still on President Trump, he's vowed to slap 25% tariffs on the EU. How's this being received over there, in the UK? Are markets reacting? Or did they react to that? It's quite extraordinary.
It's quite extraordinary, to be honest. Again, outside of, what's happening in the global south, there is a media frenzy at the moment for anything that comes out of the White House. And, we had Emmanuel Macron there just a couple of weeks ago slapping Donald Trump on the knee, seemingly having a great time trying to convince him to tone down his rhetoric against Zelensky. And within 48 hours, during Donald Trump's first cabinet meeting, he says that Europe have basically been screwing the United States for years. Those are his exact words, and that it was created to basically take advantage of America. Now, the European press are up in frenzy. They just cannot believe he's saying this because, of course, the foundations of the European Union, created in 1951, was to ensure long-lasting peace and stability on the continent. But Donald Trump insists it was to screw America, and he says they're going to be screwing them back. And he's announced sweeping, levies of up to 25% on European imports, particularly targeting the automobile industry. And so, Sir Keir Starmer has so much to contend with during that meeting, and he is going to be hosting European leaders in Downing Street this weekend. So yes, very fierce geopolitical arena at the moment. But can we take Donald Trump literally? We don't know. In that same cabinet meeting, Laddie, he said any cabinet member who doesn't support Elon Musk will be thrown out of the meeting. So, we don't know what's going on at the moment, but yes, a lot of people are at the edge of their seats.
Right. 2025 is starting off quite nervous for some countries, and investors right now, but I guess it's a wait and see.
It's a wait and see, and we are waiting and seeing.
Yeah, we're waiting and seeing.
All take out history.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Juliana, for giving us the details there. Thank you.
Thanks, Laddie.